Most of you know Patrick Duegaw, as he has been a significant force in the growing art scene within downtown Wichita and Kansas. In 1990, Duegaw co-founded the arts organization Fish House, originally conceived as a series of hit-and-run exhibition performance events that transformed abandoned spaces in downtown Wichita into art happenings, and I expect many of you were a part of that activity. Today, Fish House has its permanent home on Commerce Street and remains key to the success of downtown Wichita. Our event this evening continues this hit-and-run performance exhibition tradition, though the abandoned building has been replaced by the more institutional environs of the Ulrich Museum of Art. Two esteemed Wichita composers, Dr. Mark Foley and Mr. Dan Racer, will each be performing new compositions inspired by the works surrounding us now. At the midpoint, as is indicated in your program, artist Duegaw will also be speaking. Mark Foley is principal double bass of the Wichita Symphony Orchestra and professor of double bass and head of jazz studies here at Wichita State. Mark has been a featured soloist with the Wichita Symphony Orchestra, performs extensively as a jazz artist, and is also an avid bluegrass player. Passionate about promoting new and diverse music, he is the founder and music director of the Knob Festival of New Music, a series of concerts held in Fish House Studios every fall. Dan Racer teaches bass, music theory, composition, and directs the chamber orchestra at Friends University. He is an active musician in the Wichita area, performing as principal bassist for the Wichita Grand Opera and as a jazz bassist for many groups in this area. He's also an active composer and works in a variety of genres, from classical to jazz and beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to Pierced by Dogma, Patrick Duegaw.
Actually, first up is Mark's composition, so I'll just let him go, and then I'll talk after. So, Mark Foley.
You should always treat people the way you want to be treated. Unless you want to be treated like crap, in which case, don't. You should always conserve water. Someday, you may be the thirsty one. should be creative, not destructive. Vandalism is a pathetic form of self-expression. You should really learn to cook. Seriously. Not being able to feed yourself is just embarrassing. You should ride your bicycle more. You should always respect artists. Historically, this has rarely been a bad idea. You really should floss every damn day. You should never give unsolicited advice. Ever. Gravity, have mercy. Gravity, which keeps us all on the ground, have mercy. Gravity, have mercy. Laws of physics, which act on birds and man, have mercy. Laws of physics, have mercy. Laws of physics, which I'm not sure have the capacity for compassion, have mercy. Gravity, have mercy. Gravity, whose will is to put me back on the ground, have mercy. Gravity, have mercy. Chalk. Enough chalk. More chalk. Too much chalk. Wipe. Enough chalk. Not enough chalk. More chalk. Repeat. Wave. What town is this? Not important now. Smile. Climb. Purposeful. Tights riding up. Harder to smile now. No net, no need to look. Trust your partner, lit from below. Eye contact, snare drum roll, I barely hear it. Catch, fly, concentrate. One way or another, I'll be on the ground soon. One way or another, I'll be on the ground soon. One way or another, I'll be on the ground soon. One way or another, I'll be on the ground soon. One way or another, I'll be on the ground soon. One way or another, I'll be on the ground soon. I believe in the power of words, false words, fluffy and sticky like cotton candy. I believe in the stupidity of crowds, and I believe in their money. I believe in not asking questions. I believe people will pay to hear what they want to hear. I believe repetition will make it true. 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 I believe in the power of confusion. I believe that louder is better. I believe they will believe if I believe. Lies go down sweet and greasy like funnel cakes. I believe people will pay to hear what they want to hear. I believe repetition makes it true. 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 I believe in making promises. I believe in empty words. I believe people will pay to hear what they want to hear, served on a stick, convenient like corn dogs. I believe it's easier not to ask questions. I believe repetition makes it true. 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 I was born like this. What's your excuse? Do I look like a savage, a cannibal? This is my body. Stare at your nightmare. This is what you paid to see. unfair, that you want to see me but avoid eye contact. I'm your dark mirror. Savages, cannibals. This is my body. This is what you paid to see.
Good grooming starts with personal care. This principally means the care of your hands, your hair, your teeth, and your skin. Let's begin with the skin by taking a look at it from the doctor's point of view. Because the skin has lots of openings in its surface, foreign particles, most of them loaded with bacteria, may enter the skin and start an infection. Such an infection, if untreated or irritated, could develop into a widespread inflammation or even blood poisoning. Don't let this happen to you. Protect your skin. Keep it looking clear and fresh. Keep it clean. The best way to clean your skin is still the old-fashioned use of soap, hot water, and plenty of elbow grease. And the result is well worth the effort. You don't need scientific proof of it. You can feel it.
My box is my freedom.
Pliability is my strength.
Pliability is my strength.
Hunger is my food.
Hunger is my food.
Silence is my voice.
Silence is my voice. Darkness is my light.
Loneliness is my friendship.
Loneliness is my friendship.
Discipline is my leisure.
Discipline is my leisure.
Confinement is my expanse.
Confinement is my expanse. Not that I'm asking for your gratitude, but it took a lot of practice to be able to do this. Starting with spoons and paintbrushes, then knitting needles, plastic tubes, coat hangers. I don't think I have a gag reflex anymore. Not that I'm looking for sympathy here, but finding the alignment into the esophagus can be tricky. Mistakes can be made. Pleurisy, esophageal perforation, pericarditis. You can feel the blade move the heart slightly to the left. Not that I want to burden you with my problems, but I've been suffering a lot of sore throats lately. Scar tissue pretty much all the way down. The world record is 33 inches long. Light bulbs, neon tubes, I do it all for you. You're welcome. You didn't laugh when I got out of my tiny car. But I'm a carny. You laugh at how I make a living. I know you think my life is a freak show. But I've learned to live with my decisions. It's time to go to your enormous car. Drive home to your own freak show. And learn to live with your decisions. I'm a carny. I laugh at how you make your living. Go home, so we can laugh at each other. Go. Go in peace.
The amazing Mark Foley. Everybody. Well, it's just been so great to work with these guys, Mark and Dan. We've been collaborating for years, and yeah, it's an honor to be a part of anything they're involved in. So And thank you. I want to extend a few thanks, mainly to, well, Mark and Dan tonight, and to the staff of the Ulrich, and Bob for giving us this opportunity to come in here and do all this. Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm an artist, not a public speaker, so, and this is in fact one of my biggest anxieties, just to throw that out there. So I'm just going to explain right out of the gate the idea of the innumerable anxieties. I have this idea that people are not, they don't reside in two camps, two parties, if you will, good versus evil. I think people are more complicated than that. And so I posit that people are motivated by anxiety, fear, worry. And so I came up with this idea of the innumerable anxieties. And one of the examples that I use quite often is the idea that, okay, I choose not to rob banks, but I don't think I'm an especially virtuous person in not robbing banks. And I'm not exactly, I mean, who's not intrigued by a bank heist story, really? I mean, so anyway, so that's the idea of the good versus evil. And also, you have the 7 deadly sins on the one side and the 7 heavenly virtues. And just to put it in context, this is the middle ground. These are the innumerable anxieties, the countless worries. So I'll kind of put in context where the painting started, and that would be Fish House circa 1994. I had been living in the old Fish House, which is now Diver Studio, in the front room in Harris and Company frame shop in the front room. And we were given this opportunity to purchase the current Fish House. So I sold my car for the down payment and moved directly into 524, huge warehouse, no running water, pigeons living in there. There was pigeon guano everywhere, broken windows, so obviously pigeons came and went as they pleased. And so essentially I scraped a part of the floor off and cleaned it, and that was where I lived. Electrical was actually, there were single electrical lines down the middle of the building with bare bulbs. And you would screw in your adapter and plug in your electrical cords into that, your extension cords. So we always had this cascade of orange electrical cords throughout the building, and I've painted them several times. So, and at the time I was, I decided to go full-time as an artist, which meant I had to work part-time in other things. And so I was doing a lot of construction at the time, light construction. I worked with Eric Schmidt, one of my partners. We build decks and renovate homes and different things. I worked as a stagehand out at Century 2, loading and unloading trucks, and whatever I could do to make a little extra money. I also want to paint this picture of living in the Fish House. I would often come home from work, roll up that big garage door, and I had 21,000 square feet of unlit, empty warehouse space that I had to get through just to get to my house. So at night, I was that guy in that horror movie that everybody screamed about, like, what are you doing? You deserve to die. So anyway, so that was the Fish House at that time and my life as a whole. So I started on these 3 anxiety paintings. So the first one started out with the monster painting. And at the time I was really intrigued by the art from the Hindu religion. Multiple limbs showed amazing amount of action in a static sculpture or a painting. And I thought that was really interesting. So I started that painting and decided, well, I needed to have sort of wings, if you will, or secondary canvases on the side to allow for those extra arms. It then turned into sort of a crucifix form. at that time. So then I worked on, and I want to point out that every subsequent piece, the piece that I just finished always influenced the next one. I guess that stands to reason, but I just learn, and as I go along, I think that's important to take what all your mistakes and all that, and apply it to the next project. So in the next project, it was the tightrope walker, and I had done all my, first of all, I decided that the convention for these paintings was going to be 3 panels, one long horizontal panel, 92 inches long, 34 inches wide, and then 2 side panels, 34 inches wide, I guess at the side panels, and then 22 inches. So it kind of created this convention, as I said, and I would just slide those side panels down depending on the composition at the time, and I always try to change it up. So in that piece, I obviously slid one panel up and one panel down. And when I did that painting, I did the underdrawing in ink with a special marker. And a little later, that marker bled through the finished painting, and it startled me, and I wasn't sure if I liked it, and eventually I grew to love it, and I understood that now suddenly this was another way to show movement and action. And also process, which was another thing I'm very interested in. I mean, in the past, I would do, a bunch of drawings, the underdrawing, which would get obliterated by the final image. But in this way, I get to actually show that image. So that was a happy accident. And then I started applying that to the next one, for example, and on into my following work. So, like I said, I did this painting next and applied that knowledge. And I try to shake up too, so that one was a primarily red painting. This one's going to be mostly blue. Obviously, there's red and blue in there, but then that informs the colors of the next, or the composition of the next piece. So then I started the swimmer behind me, and I decided, it needed to be now horizontal, and those panels are serving a different purpose and a different color scheme. So I started that painting in 1998, and I just ran into a wall with it. I just could not figure out how to finish it. It just wasn't, all my solutions just weren't correct. So I set it aside, and I was also working simultaneously on cutting up the walls of my bedroom. I used to draw a lot on the sheetrock, the raw sheetrock in my room, and so at that time, I started cutting out panels and making paintings off of this work, which then led to my painted theater project, which is sort of one that's I've carried on through for the last 10 or so years. And in this project, I'm using the sheetrock, again, learning from my last project, and creating these components for a play. So basically, when you come to an exhibition, one of my painted theater project exhibitions, you would be given a cast, so detailed portraits. You'd be given a set, so it would be a panoramic version or a scene of, in this case, my space, and that would be the set of the play. And then I would create props. So in one play, I decided that the play was about creation. So I did a series of tools, and I used certain portraits that sort of conveyed my idea about creation, and the set also conveyed that. The next piece, the next play, I could switch it around, use a different set piece, and it's about destruction and different props, such as the fire extinguisher I would use as, the fire extinguisher would be the prop for that play. So it was a really fun project in that way, because anywhere I showed, I could just mix and match and make up a different storyline, and obviously the audience could decide whatever. I mean, I would give them the tools to come up with their own narrative, essentially. So I was working on this project, and it's very detailed work. Lots of small brushes and small movements, and after a while, I mean, some of these paintings would take almost a year to complete, and it would, just not having that sense of completion drove me a little bit nuts. And I actually use cooking a lot to to help me out in that way, because I love to cook. So cooking a nice meal at the end of the day, suddenly I have the, I mean, it's not quite the same, but I would pull out the swimmer, and the idea being that suddenly I can use maybe bigger brushes, use larger strokes. And I would do this year after year, and finally Elizabeth basically said, shit or get off the pot on this one. And so I think mainly to spite her, I started working on it again, seriously. Took it out, hung it, and really put some time to it. And it occurred to me the water wings are the perfect solution for this. It just popped in. I mean, I've been thinking about it for literally 15 years, and it suddenly, the answer popped into my head, and that did it for me. So then that opened the floodgates up, and suddenly I had ideas coming out of my head. I started mining my old sketchbooks, trying to find old ideas that I could plug into this new project that I had. And then Bob offered me the show, and I pitched this idea, and so suddenly I had a mission for the last two and a half years. Anyway, so the circus idea. So the reason I chose the circus theme was because the circus is a really safe way to experience anxiety or fear, because you're not affected. You're experiencing it vicariously through the performers, and you know that they're professionals. They're not going to do anything stupid normally. So it's kind of like a haunted house is another good example, where you know you're not going to get killed in a haunted house, but you go because you're going to be frightened. That's why you're going to a haunted house. So I just thought this was a great way to present this idea of this innumerable anxieties in a way that was safe, so all of you could enjoy it without actually feeling the anxiety. So I thought I would just maybe walk you through the space a little bit and kind of briefly touch on some of these. I don't want to go too long. We have another amazing piece coming up. So like I said, we've been working on this for a couple years now, and I've had the plan for this, the exhibition laid out for on paper forever. And the idea was that you would, come into the space, veer to the left, like you do in a grocery store, right? Everybody kind of goes to the produce and then wanders around, and that's how you would enter the tent, if you will. And the first thing you would see, apart from the obvious title piece, you would see the fire extinguisher, maybe. But part of me was hoping people would walk by it, not realizing that it's actually a painting and not a real fire extinguisher. I actually hung that at code, to code. And I mean, obviously it's lit. Most fire extinguishers aren't lit, but it's actually to scale, and it's set in the wall. And what's interesting about this fire extinguisher is, if you look closely, there's a skull and crossbones, because, frankly, I've got boobs, I've got crosses, I gotta have skull in there to be a real artist, right? So anyway, there's a skull and crossbones in there, but that is actually on that fire extinguisher. It's a halon fire extinguisher, which are, I believe they're illegal now, because they're filled with poisonous gas, and if you use it, you might die if you don't have the proper equipment, right? So, yeah, it's made for chemical fires mostly. I don't know why it was in the Architectural Museum in Montreal, but it was. But I love that idea that something that can save you can also kill you. And so I collected fire extinguishers. That was another whole other series I did, where I would just, if I saw an interesting one, I would snap a shot and paint it. So as you walk into the hallway here, and you in a way, for me, it was like walking into a circus tent. And you walk by the lithograph, which is kind of like a circus poster. I did that lithograph with Mike Sims out at up in Kansas City at Lawrence Lithography. He's amazing, amazing to work with. And I did that print. It was actually a study for the clown painting, and I did the study actually on the stone. So I made a lot of my decision making for that painting on the stone as I went, and then printed. So it's kind of awkward and maybe even a little bit distorted, but it's true to thought, I guess. Then of course you have the trapeze artist flying solo, and he is, it's like birth, you know, he's kind of hairless apart from having some eyebrows, some heavy eyebrows, naked, and oh, by the way, and I always start out with these clothed. All my sketches, which if you made it to the Fish House, I have another show up there, and it's all my study drawings for this exhibition are in there. All my sketchbooks are out, and so. But yeah, most of them are clothed in my sketches. But then I decided that I wanted to pare it down, you know, limit the amount of information that was there. Plus, I mean, that's what we are. We're just humans, right? So the idea of being alone, birth, all sorts of, they're innumerable, the anxieties in all of these. So I touched on the swimmer. Actually, the swimmer painting, it's about being alone in a large body of water. If you've ever swam in a giant lake where you can't see to a certain depth, it's pretty frightening. And then there may be some transgender issues, because when I was a kid, I actually was forced to wear a flowered bathing cap just like that one, because I suffered from ear problems and I loved to swim, so I constantly had Vaseline and cotton balls in my ears and a big flowered plastic. The flowers were actually plastic sticking. It was awful. So, and then we wind around to the set piece. I'm not too loud, am I? Is this all right? Sound okay? Okay. Then we wind around to the set piece, and the idea behind this was it is anxiety exemplified. Like if you walk through that, this is my house, painted, it's a 320-degree view, 40 degrees missing. We don't know what's going on in that 40 degrees. There's a fire extinguisher that's out of date for 20 years. There's unattended candles burning, fireplace open with embers on wooden furniture. The heat lamps are going. The electric heaters are going. The toaster's going. So it's basically this giant fireball just ready to happen, which is one of my biggest fears, is just burning my whole world up. Well, my second biggest fear. So it's actually kind of a Where's Waldo. I think you could, I haven't even counted how many things are in there, but there's also little details like I've included some art, postcards by Otto Dixon and Chagall, and well, there are a couple other ones, but the Chagall painting is actually the burning house. The Otto Dix is a portrait of a big star in Germany, I believe 1920-ish, who basically was burned out. She died young, but a huge star. So these are the kind of things that are there, but I felt like it set the it set the scene. And also, I'm really interested in this idea of effigies, or of mythological effigies. So I was raised in a Catholic household, and my grandparents had pictures of Jesus and and Virgin Mary and crucifixes and various things. And I know in some Catholic households, for example, there are candles, those candles you can buy in the grocery store with saints on them, pictures of saints, and maybe a Buddhist family might have a shrine for Buddha, and maybe a Hindu family might have pictures of Shiva and a calendar of Shiva, just living within, like above them, like in their space, and they're very real to everybody that lives with them. And so I painted my own effigies of anxiety within my house. So these are my effigies in my house. So anyway, so then there's the contortionist, just fear of tight spaces, and that is metaphorical as well as general. I'm a tightrope walker, really. The subtitle on that is, I think it's performance in front of men. I mean, who doesn't have that neighbor that's a car guy, and when you go to open the hood of your car, you think it's going to be something easy, and he comes over and says, well, what do you got going on here? And you have to look really stupid in front of him, and I hate that. But in that painting, there are all kinds of people. There's my architectural professor in school. I think there's a little Hitler in there somewhere. And anyway, kind of fun stuff there. And I was also having some relationship issues, obviously. Long time ago. And then the monster painting, which is basically just about worrying about doing something wrong inadvertently, something bad inadvertently. The futility of unsolicited advice, at that point I wanted to shake up the color. I rarely use purple in my paintings, but I felt like, why not? I gotta use it. And that was one of a million thoughts that went through my head. But what sort of started this was, so my wife Elizabeth has a word, a verb. It is to Duegaw somebody, and that is to give somebody unsolicited advice. She's constantly grabbing my arm. Oh my God, do not Duegaw them, And so that was the idea. And so all of the, I don't know if you've all experienced it, but there's a little machine in that frame that my friend Mike Marlette helped me with. Hi, Mike. He's the IT guy behind it. It's a card dispenser, and he actually rigged up a little toy car wheel in there that makes a noise that sounds very mechanical in there. And it's a motion detector, so every third person it'll spit out a card, and the card says what mark. I think you heard them all. So. Then it's the voiceless leader, and the idea, so topical today, the self-appointed leader, and I'm playing with all kinds of stuff there, just the idea of wanting to voice your views or your commands, and nobody can hear you, but you're not willing to listen to them. There's a cork in his ear, the one good ear he has. That's me, I'm deaf in one ear. So, and it's kind of a play on having his foot in his mouth. It's kind of to spite himself. So that's, and then there's a little air gauge, a little air pressure gauge there mounted on there. My friend Steve Atwood helped me with the frame on that. He's a wizard. And then there's the unfunny clown, which is basically about martyrdom and self-martyrdom. And my friend Randy Crawley helped me with that frame. And it's glorious and big, and we were worried it wasn't going to fit out the door of Fish House to get here. And then lastly, there's the sword swallower, and that's the idea that, and again, very topical, just people killing themselves and others just for their own dogma. Anyway, so I'm going to wrap it up, and I'm going to introduce the fabulous Dan Racer. And after this, we're going to have question and answers for anybody that wants to, for all three of us, for anybody that wants to stick around. But thank you all very much for coming. And
have a few minutes for Q&A. If I could ask your cooperation, we'd like to have you use the mic when you ask your questions. And I'd like to thank Randy Zellers on guitar and Andrew Slater on percussion that joined Daniel Racer for their performance this evening. Yes.
Did Dan and Mark actually sit in front of the pieces as they composed their work?
What was the question?
Did you and Dan actually sit in front of each piece as you composed your work?
I did a little bit. Yeah, I looked at the text a lot too. Yeah, and then I actually, in the process, I came back to the pieces and was like, oh, I'm all wrong. So I took some wrong turns and then got back on track. So yeah, I was able to refer to these pieces, and that helped a lot.
I'm short. Actually, I did a piece already to 5 of the pieces before in a previous show. So I was familiar with these 3 and this one, and what was the other one that was in the...
These 3, this one, and the one in the front.
Oh, and the pierced by the sword sorrow, yeah. So I already knew those pieces. I was already very familiar with them. And then the new pieces, the fortune teller and the voiceless leader, and that I had Patrick sending me pictures, lots and lots of pictures, and I was up there a few times in the studio to look at them, and then we had a lot of conversations about the pieces and what they're about and what was going into them and stuff like that. So a lot of conversation helped with my end of things. So yeah.
Patrick, what's your idea of the ultimate fate of these paintings? Do you see them all installed in a large public place or sold off individually? As you know, I'm a
Yes,
Patrick
definitely.
Duegaw fan.
All of that. No,
But I don't have wall space for any of these, although I'd love to have
they're
one.
really big, and I hope to have them. I would like them to travel. I'd like to have more and get these guys on the road. That's what we want to do. But yeah, I think, I hadn't gotten that far, to be honest, George. I just, but ultimately, it'd be great to have them in a collection. So.
As you all know, I'm fans of all of your work, so bravo, bravo. I thought it was really interesting how sensitive both of the composers were to the metaphorical nature of your work as you described it tonight, and as I know it to be, that's very important. And I kind of thought it was interesting the different ways you approached it, and I wonder if you could kind of summarize maybe how each of the composers maybe responded. I think I could maybe summarize, but I'd like to hear it from you guys.
Well, right off the bat, I mean, obviously, right off the bat, obviously, I love the fact that Mark, I mean, it was totally different in their approaches, as far as Mark was pretty contained in his studio and produced this sort of electronic and, just a solo act, which I think is somewhat rare, really, somewhat rare. And then Dan, who had in the last thing that we had done together, he went acoustic, more or less. I mean, they're amplified, but yeah, a trio. So yeah, I love the fact that it was interpreted in not only by 2 different composers, but in 2 different distinctive approaches in the performance aspect of it. So that's what I mean, mostly.
I was really inspired by the narrative and how these pieces hang together. I mean, circus and the religious imagery, that's pretty nuts, and gave me a lot to work with. And also, as a composer, working with a text eliminates a lot of the decision fatigue, you know? So to make it even easier for myself, I arrange these pieces in a mass, because as a classical musician, I study the Holy Mass, and that's a text that keeps getting reset and reset and reset. And so I was able to I don't call myself a wordsmith, but I was able to take Patrick's narrative, which is so strong, and then impose it's not the Holy Mass. I mean, it's a very secular thing that I did, but I wanted to draw on the imagery. So I took the poetry of the Mass and bent it to my will, and also bent it into this circus theme too. And then it all just hung together, and I'm not much of a poet, but boy, the words just came out. And then if you have words, then you know what to do with them as a composer. It made it it made it pretty easy, and I hope it kind of the narrative of the whole work hung together that way. I hope that helps.
I'm sorry, my music vocabulary is not very good, but what is it called? The word part of a liturgy, or well, isn't there another? When they were composing operas, for example, you would have libretto. Okay, that's what I think the word I was looking for. Amazing, yeah.
My whole goal was to be as short as possible with every single movement that I did, because I overwrite, and so I wanted to try to take each painting and distill it to a single element or single thing that I thought was going on in that, and make it strictly about that, and just try to go for the mood and the feel in each, because like Mark, there's a good narrative, it's a great narrative, and the last two times I've collaborated with Patrick, there's been so much to draw from. I actually tried to go the opposite direction this time, and actually be brief, and just go for one thing. So when it was for example, the distorted sense of melancholy, the winding up, and then just the constant kind of droning and tension of going in and out of tune with each other, and that kind of feeling of uneasiness, that was the goal. So, yeah. Okay. Good. Good. Any reaction's a good reaction.
I think Dan has a question.
So for Patrick, has the making of this work been therapeutic, and have your anxieties thus subsided?
Dan, I think you know the answer to that question. But, I mean, in a way, it's always, well, actually, no, it increased my anxiety. This has been a tough couple of years, to be honest. I mean, and I had a couple of thank yous that I mentioned earlier, but I really want to thank Elizabeth, my wife, to the fact that she put up with me. Can we do, you know? You know, not only did she put up with me and my moods, but she's my second pair of eyes. She's the one that would, you know, I'd drag her down. Okay, am I doing what I need to do here? No. And the bravery of that to tell me, no, you're not hitting the mark. I mean, so, but no, it was not. I'm calm now. This is my, well, soon.
Any more questions? Yes.
Simple question. What's next?
Jennifer, I'm not thinking about that right now. Just let me have this night.